Hey everybody, I'm Dan Schinder,
And I'm Steven Schinder.
and you're watching or listening to Yesshift. What the heck is Yesshift again, Steve?
It's a podcast slash vlog where we're a father-son team. You're the dad, I'm the son, in case anyone needs reminding, including ourselves. And we talk about Yes and lots of things related to Yes, including their members.
And there are many shifts through the many Yes lives and incarnations, and there's been some reincarnations, in fact. And as we're recording this today on June 24th, 2022, it is Patrick Moraz's birthday. Happy birthday, Pat.
Yeah, he's 74 now, and he joined Yes back in 74. Wow, that's,
Yeah,
what a long
that's
time.
crazy. And we're listening to piano solo in the background for Patrick when he performed with Yes back. It would have been yesterday, 1975, June 23rd, 1975, at the Long Beach Sports Arena, a great venue. I saw Yes play there on the second leg of the Tormato Tour in 1979. But, you know, Pat is... This is what I want to talk about. And folks, chime in, too, please, in the comments. Steve's going to relay comments. We want to know your thoughts. You know, Steve, am I correct that Pat Moraz and the drama lineup, are those the only one-off lineups with Yes? Am I forgetting anything?
Well, with the drama lineup, it depends on whether or not you count Return Trip, which...
I don't, because it
Okay.
didn't start out that way and they didn't perform that way.
Right, yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, because Chris had already passed away, and that was more of an edit type of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think you might be... Well, the Heaven and Earth lineup and the Quest lineup are each different, so... Yeah, those might be the only three. And I guess it also depends on whether, you know, on Open Your Eyes, Igor was only on a couple tracks. So yeah, I guess it depends on like what you consider with that.
It's true. So it's a little more complicated than I thought. But if we look at...
Oh, Magnification as well. That was
Oh,
the
wow.
one-off
Yeah,
one.
duh. Interesting.
Yeah,
So let me
familiar,
pose it this way. It's amazing to me what an incredible impact Patrick Moraz had on progressive rock music and Yes, and their sound, and Yes fans, for only being on one album. I think the only thing somewhat comparable to that, depending on how you look at it, is the Trauma lineup. And what makes it comparable is that at the time that was a first and sort of a one-off lineup that did something very different. And it kind of at the time was probably the first thing that exposed Yes to new audiences because of the change in music and production and kind of the two crossover members from a different genre, really. But Pat, you know, today Relayer is still, we did that survey once, and it's still so many fans' favorite album, and it was a once and done thing. And here we are so many years later, and it's still, you know, definitely the most musically complicated album, if you look at it from a technical standpoint, musically rivaling Close to the Edge, certainly, and the most esoteric, I think it's fair to say, even though Close to the Edge, again, was probably the first to be the most esoteric at that time. And then this one just sort of amplified that whole spirit, yet, and You and I isn't really that esoteric. Siberian Khatru, you can kind of dance to that. But even To Be Over is quite a complicated piece. I mentioned to you about a week ago, I played that in my studio. For those of you who don't know, I'm a drummer. And I was reminded of how complicated that simple song is, if that makes any sense. So my point is that Patrick had such a huge impact on Yes. But what we're going to talk about today for his birthday goes way beyond that, with his first solo album since becoming a member of Yes, which is Story of I.
Yeah, and it's also his first solo album ever, like with most of these Yes solo album first.
Right.
And yeah, Relayer is definitely my second favorite Yes album behind Tales, so it's really high up there for me as well. But going into the story of I guess we should provide a little context to sort of set the mood, so to speak. So, in 1972, Patrick had been a musical director for a Brazilian ballet, so that kind of sowed the seeds for some of the Brazilian stuff that's carried over onto this album. You got like the Brazilian percussionists, I believe,
Right.
and then a lot of material. His pre-Yes band, he was in a couple pre-Yes bands, Main Horse, but then right before he was in Refugee, and they did not end up making a second album, but some of the material for that was left over for this. I'm not sure what specifically, but he had some stuff lying around, I guess. And with Yes, when he performed with them on the Relayer tour, and you can see this in the QPR video as well, there were excerpts in his piano solo where it's very much sounds like, it's a do 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 like we just played earlier, and
Yeah.
you hear that in both of the tracks, Descent and Impressions. They sound kind of different tonally, but it's those same notes. And he recorded The Story of I in the autumn of 1975. So around the time he was guesting on Steve Howe's Beginnings and Chris Squire's Fish Out of Water. Apparently over a period of a little more than 4 months that was recorded. And it was released in apparently June 17th, 1976. I saw somewhere else that said May, but in either case, it's the next in this series of solo albums from this period. And just in terms of the music world in general, Rush's 2112 was out by this time. And I don't think I mentioned this last time when we talked Ramshackled, but there was that one band, Starcastle, that put out their first album around this time that sounded very Yes-ish to people. Like it has like some similar vocal harmonies and things. And around this time, you also get the Alan Parsons Project with the debut album Tales of Mystery and Imagination. I believe that's what it's called. Let me just double check that. Okay, yeah. And yeah, it's kind of funny with Patrick, Rick, and much later Tony. Their first solo albums are concept albums, and of course John Anderson's would be as well. But basically, the concept of this album. Well, I actually have a quote of like when sort of the story that he's told of like when he came up with it. So this is from an excerpt from Martin Popoff's book Time and a Word. So I'm just gonna paraphrase this a bit. So according to Patrick, the inspiration for The Story of I came to me during the course of an elevator ride in a newly built hotel in America. The idea implanted itself in a flash. It immediately became clear that it was an allegory about life itself. What came to me was a way to present an abstract and spiritual train of thought under the guise of a concrete story, a kind of sci-fi story with plenty of symbolic narratives of figurative twists with its own rights, games, and rules, as well as endless interactive situations. And so he's also said in the old Grey Whistle Test interview from back in the day that the on the cover, it's basically a letter I. It looks like a tower with an electronic sphere at the top. And, it's a sci-fi story, and and the story I've always heard is that it's about these people who go into this tower and their desires come true, but two of them fall in love and they want to escape the tower because it's kind of a prison. But Patrick also said in that interview that the letter I, being the 9th letter in the alphabet, is important because the number 9 has this symbolism to it where it represents reincarnation, love, and death. So that's sort of the context behind the story of I.
Interesting.
Um,
I'd like to know. We don't have the answer unless you happen to know. For more context, I'd like to know if you mentioned he thought of that. He said he thought of that on an elevator ride. Was that a one floor ride or 12 floors or 19 floors? Because that's pretty deep. So, how long was that elevator ride?
yeah, that's a good question. It would be kind of funny if it was just one level and he just came up with like
He said in
a
a
good
flash.
chunk of it.
So, maybe. I don't know.
Right.
But the other thing I've wondered is, did he know by this point whether or not he was going to be returning to Yes?
At this time, he was still very much ingrained and cemented in the band. It wasn't until a bit into the Going for the One sessions that they decided they wanted to bring Rick back. So around this time, it still felt like he was in the band for a while. And I was gonna say this later, but I guess I'll say it now since like you kind of reminded me. But I kind of get the feeling that if there weren't all these, all these attempts to bring Rick back or all these changes in styles or musical differences, I kind of have a hunch that Patrick Moraz could have ended up being the longest serving Yes keyboardist. If they didn't have like all these
In a
conflicts.
row, you mean?
Yeah, or like didn't need Tony for the Yes West era because they needed another original member. Like, because in '97, I might have told you this a while ago, but after Rick left in 1997, Patrick offered up his services, but they
Yeah.
went with Igor instead, and so it really makes me wonder, like, how long could he have served in like either era if they had just stuck with him?
And how would that affected their music? Because would it have been the Patrick Moraz from Relayer, or what was the Patrick Moraz of 1997, 98, 99? Would he have been in alignment with what they did with Open Your Eyes and The Ladder, and would he have stayed through what may have become, maybe magnification wouldn't have become magnification at all because they decided on going with the orchestra instead of a cube. It is a domino of other parallel universes that we can only sort of, make up or fantasize about or guess. It's hard to prognosticate on that. Um, that's an interesting thing. I remember hearing Chris Squire. I don't remember when this was, but him talking about the subtraction of Patrick, if I may put it that way. That I heard two stories, and I don't remember how intertwined they are. One, he just kind of stopped showing up and returning calls, and the other was that his musically he just got too superfluous for where they wanted to go. And if you look at Going for the One, it's a fairly commercial album,
Right.
especially compared to what came right before it, let alone the previous 3 or 5 albums. Um, and if Pat, well, I'm not questioning, but being that Pat to some degree had Patrick, I hope you don't mind me referring to you as Pat, had Sir Moraz, had XYZ% of writing influence and composition influence on what became the Going for the One album, what got curbed and what couldn't be curbed that meant he wasn't a fit? There's just so many musical questions there, I think.
Yeah, and there is that speculation that it might have been him on that demo of what became Does It Really Happen? Because it kind of sounds like him at the start
Oh,
of that
wow. I'd have
demo.
to hear that again. I haven't heard that in so long. Huh.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
when would that demo have been recorded? Back then or
Well,
in 80
it was
or
included as a
79?
bonus track on Tormato, but if it is Patrick, it would have been during the Going for the One sessions
Right.
because he said that he was very involved with composing some things with them back then, and some of it might be lost or erased or something, but
Hmm.
Yeah.
When did he first bring that up? Do you happen to know?
I remember that was mentioned in Notes from the Edge interview, probably in like the mid to late 2000s or something.
Huh. Okay. So it's not like it happened in 77 and he was trying to pull a Francis Monkman. I wrote that in case it did really well or something.
Yeah, I mean,
It's interesting.
regardless of what went down with Yes, he seems very, you know, if there were any problems back then, it's all water under the
Oh,
bridge
yeah.
by now because he's attended fan conventions. He even was in a Q and A with them at that 50th anniversary thing 4 years ago and
I
performed at
saw him at
Boone and yeah.
yeah, and I saw him at the Forum Club, which is it's not backstage, it's upstairs. It's the exclusive club area of the Los Angeles Forum. When they did the Union tour, he was hanging out there with
Yeah.
them. So it's just to me somewhere there's a parallel universe with a lot more Yes music involving Patrick. There has to be. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about that. There has to be because he had such a huge impact on, like even look at QPR. That concert is legendary because of the music and it's some of the best recorded stuff. Even though the audio is whacked out volume wise, it's I don't know. The whole thing is so interesting what that could have been and what didn't happen. Switching gears just a little bit, if I may,
Yeah.
and folks, let us know how familiar you are with Patrick's music outside of Yes, and if Relayer, maybe you're younger like Steve and not familiar with Relayer. If you're older like me and familiar with it, where does it sit in your ranking? And switching gears a little bit, that promo video that you sent me was a huge flashback for me. And it really reminded me of what an outstanding and groundbreaking musician he was and what he brought to the Relayer album. If you just listen to the synthesizer and keyboard sounds on there, and even his fingering and his portamento and bending of the notes, just the way he plays, all those reflections and colors and textures were there. I want more Patrick Moraz, actually,
Yeah.
I mean, it was so good. And listening to it, I couldn't help but think if I never knew about it and I heard it today and someone said, when do you think this came out? I wouldn't be able to guess the year, which I think is cool. He's got such a unique sound that is not like if you listen to old Sly and the Family Stone, it sounds like old, soul music from that period, the early 70s. If you listen to, this, that, or the other thing, you kind of tell the time period. With the music that's in that promo film, you kind of can't. And his solo album, Story of I, is a lot like that.
Yeah, it's kind of like that time I asked someone, I played Tales to them and asked them when did they think it's from, and they thought it was from like 2002. Um,
Yeah. It's from the future. It's from the
it,
future past.
yeah, but yeah, that promo video, it's very surreal the way it's edited and all the crossfading, and it includes excerpts from the songs
Yeah.
Impact, The Storm, Kashasa, Best Years of Our Lives, and Rise and Fall. And what Patrick wanted to do was make it like a trailer, and I think he succeeded
Yeah.
at that. It gives a taste of everything that's on it, basically.
And to watch the video, it's easier to speculate when it was made because it has total production of that era, video production. Without watching the video, it's much more difficult. It could come out today and I go, whoa, this is great. I wouldn't even say, this sounds like it's rehashed older stuff. It just doesn't come across to me that way. If I put on my objective listener ears,
Yeah. So I'll go ahead and read off the track list real quick, and then we can comment on some of these songs, like
And
anything
I'll show a
that
couple
stood out to
pictures of
us.
him while you're doing that.
All right, yeah. So on side one, we've got Impact, Warmer Hands, The Storm, Kashasa, Intermezzo, Indoors, Best Years of Our Lives. And on side two, we've got Descent, Incantation, Dancing Now, Impressions, Like a Child in Disguise, Rise and Fall, and Symphony in Space. So, what sort of stands out from some of these songs, like in your head, like just off the bat,
You
Dad?
know, what's interesting is the shortest song um, that's not even a minute, is it?
The
Uh,
Storm?
yeah, I like the storm, and it's the song. It's that song. I think a lot of albums, well, other than Close to the Edge, Relay, and Tales, a lot of albums have a song where you wish it was longer, and that's that song for me. Oh, I want more. Like it is such a tease. Why is it
Yeah.
only that short? You know, I love the sounds. I love that song, and it's just it's like that. You know, um,
Yeah.
I
It
love
kind of feels
this.
like an interlude. Yeah.
Yeah, dancing now. Um, uh, uh, it's actually pronounced cachaça, if I remember right. That it's a Brazilian C, and that
Yeah.
if I remember right, that's the S sound. I love that. And intermezzo, if it's Italian pronunciation. And I'm also reminded something that I want to look up real quick because I know you're going to go through the lineup, and this is really bugging me. So I'm going to jump ahead to that while you give your favorites. I want to look up and see how old Jeff Berlin was then, because this
Okay.
is 1975, and I think he's only like 7 years older than me, and I was 12 in 1975. Is that right? Yeah. So I want to
Yeah.
see when Jeff was born. But what are your favorites?
My favorite is definitely Kashasa. It's it just sticks with me. And I also like the bonus tracks that were included a few years ago. Kashasa variations. It's kind of goes in like different direction. As the title would imply, a variation of it.
Yeah.
And the other one was let me just see what it was called. It had like children's voices in the title. Um, yeah, so it was called Kashasa. Okay, I thought it would be like right on here, but hang on.
Okay, no worries. And I looked up Jeff. He's a little older than I thought. He's 10 years older than I am. So he's 69, so he would have been only 22 then.
Okay, I was right. It was Kashasa children's
Oh,
voices. Yeah, it adds like some dialogue from kids and some adults, and yeah, so it's very much how it sounds.
cool.
Yeah, this was a big thing for Jeff Berlin because this was apparently Ray Gomez, who also performs on this album, recommended Jeff Berlin, and then Patrick, if I remember correctly, recommended Jeff Berlin to Bill Bruford
Yes,
after this. Yeah.
that's correct. Yeah. And there's a great story about that in Bill Bruford's biography about him going over to Jeff's parents' house where Jeff was still living, I guess, in New York. And there
Yeah.
was this big Italian dinner, and they thought they had this big rock star at their. And he just talked about how warm and welcoming the family was, and just what a monster musician Jeff was. You just had to have him. And then I met Jeff on the ABWH tour in San Diego when he was filling in for Tony Levin. He was just so nice.
Yeah. Um,
And we're
but
friends on
as
Facebook, so we're basically brothers.
yeah, you just edited the profile info and list him as brother. Yeah.
Yeah.
But going through these songs again, Impact makes a great first impression because it begins with that very spacey vibe. It reminded me of Three Ships, the John Anderson version, but this is even more
Yeah.
spacey. It just comes crashing down. And another thing that struck me was the vocal harmonies on Warmer Hands sound very Yes. Like,
Yeah.
okay, so it's not just me.
It's not
Yeah.
just you. Heard that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and on Indoors, there's some stuff that goes on that reminds me a bit of ELP, with Tarkus or Carnival 9. Like, there's a bit where
Oh, that's
it,
interesting with the
it's
organ.
like, yeah, it's like very quick, like, or I don't know how to emulate, but there's like a quick bit that kind of reminds me of something that ELP would do.
Yeah.
Um, and Rise and Fall is just like there's a lot packed into that one. It's just
Yeah,
like sort of a roller coaster. Yeah.
and I think Symphony in Space, you sent me three solos by him. Two were of the piano solo, the one we played in the intro, and the other one I'm pretty sure was Symphony in Space.
Okay. Yeah, Symphony in Space sounded Vangelis esque to me. I don't know if you got that vibe as
Yeah,
well,
it
but
was.
yeah.
Um, it's like for folks who aren't familiar with it, it's like a big sound pad and ambient music before ambient music was a musical term. I think would be fair to say.
Yeah, and what's weird is in my head, the ending of Symphony in Space, I could imagine sort of segueing into Elias of Sunhillow,
But
because
that's interesting. Hey,
yeah,
that
because
would
they're
be
similar
neat to
sounds.
string an album together with a song from each of their. That'd be interesting.
Oh, there actually was something sort of like that. So back
Really?
in 1976, well, this was just for like radio DJs, I think. They were given copies of
Oh,
this record called Yes Solos, and it had two tracks from each of these five albums. So, yeah, I guess it's sort of a collector's thing now. But yeah, maybe for Elias of Sunhillow, we'll like also look up the track list and sort of talk about what we think of that tracking order and
yeah.
whatnot.
And by the way, I always get nervous when you start out a sentence with "in my head," just so you know.
Yeah, but looking at the personnel, yeah, there are like no Yes members on this. Like you got John McBurney and Vivienne McAuliffe. I think that's how it's pronounced, doing the vocal work. So
Hmm.
you don't have John and Chris. And as for the drums, you have Alphonse
Alphonse
Mouzon.
Mouzon is an
Okay.
incredible drummer. Yeah,
Okay, yeah, on side one, and then on side two, you have Andy Newmark.
right. Both great drummers, and then the percussionists of Rio de Janeiro, um,
You also
Vivian.
got Jean de Antoni on electric lead and rhythm guitars. But
Right.
yeah, go on.
Yeah, I was gonna say Vivian's voice is great and a great fit for his music as well. Um, really great players here, and the interesting thing I wanted to mention also about Patrick's playing, there I don't think there was anyone around then that had his sound. Like he clearly had his own sound, and I think the closest person who would have somewhat of a similar sound, I'd say there's traces of each other's sound between him and Jan Hammer. Him and Jan Hammer had a lot of things with the bending of the notes and the portamento and the fusion-esque and the stuff Jan did with Jeff Beck and things like that. But other than that, that's why, if I can, I don't mean this as a criticism, I just can't find a better word. That's why on the on the QPR concert with Patrick with Yes, Close to the Edge and those songs sound so kind of weirdly different because they're all Patrick's sounds. He didn't say, okay, we did To Be Over, Gates of Delirium, and Sound Chaser. Now we're going to play Roundabout and Close to the Edge with those sounds. He took his sound from Relayer and inserted it in those songs. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying.
Okay, and hopefully the fans that makes sense. Rather than saying, "Okay, I'm going to play Close to the Edge with Rick's Close to the Edge sounds," or get close to that, and he doesn't try to. It's his sounds, and it makes it
Yeah.
sound very different in a lot of ways. But it sounds like that Yes lineup. It doesn't just sound like Patrick. It sounds like that Yes lineup, which is cool.
Yeah. And I guess I should have asked this earlier, but
I'm sorry,
what
we're out of
was
time.
what was your first experience with this music, Dad? Did you hear some of it like back in the day, like when
Yeah,
it came out, or
I did. A friend of mine back then, so maybe when we were 13, he's my age, got the album and played it for me. I think I heard it 2 to 4 times back then and never heard it again. And when you sent me that promo trailer, I was like, whoa, like, where has this been? And back then, again, like you, I got into some pretty deep music at a very young age. So I was already into Yes, but this was like left field. For a 13-year-old, that was still trying to get his head around what Yes and ELP was and, that kind of stuff. And somewhere I have, it's funny when I think about it, I look up here, I have on a shelf up here, old 2-track reel-to-reel tape player, a stack of tapes, and somewhere a box of tapes. On one of those is an interview of Jim Ladd on KMET before he was on KLOS. LA station, and the show might have been syndicated. I don't remember, but he interviewed this Yes lineup, and it was at a restaurant. You can hear their cups clinking and silverware and stuff. And that might have been how I found out that Patrick was in the band, because I noticed the absence of Rick, and then this guy Pat was chiming in, didn't have that accent, and it was weird. And again, I was young. I was like 12 or whatever.
Yeah, for me, I think, almost 14 or had just turned 14. And this was back in, yeah, I think I was like maybe still 13 and not 14. Yeah, but anyway.
So this
was back in 2008.
Yeah. So the album had some shelf life by then, and music had transcended to a different era. And here you were listening to that. What was your impression of it compared to what else you were listening to around then, and what was that other stuff?
Yeah, that was the time when I was going through their solo albums and also getting into other prog rock bands like Pink Floyd, ELP, King Crimson, Genesis. And so with Story of I, with some of these albums, I would listen to them once because I wanted to move on to the next thing and see what it was about. And I think my impression was that it's strange and some of it is memorable, but listening to it again now, I'm like, wow, why haven't I re-listened to this more? This is brilliant.
Same here. I'm leaving it up. I have it on my laptop right here, folks. So I'm leaving it up. I still have a tab open from when we did the Steve Howe show. When was that? 2 months ago?
Yeah, it was.
I still have that tab up and listen to that once in a while, and I've got some of those songs stuck in my head still.
Yeah, I remember you had said that Beginnings became, or I think you might have said something like this, that it became like your favorite out of these solo albums we've talked about.
Yes, definitely.
I think I'm having that effect with Story of I.
Interesting. I'm going to have to see if that changes when I spin it a few times and get it back in here, And folks, if you haven't heard it, gotta look it up. Buy it, download it. Give it a whirl on YouTube, but if you like it, buy it. Let the artist, make some money.
Yeah, and I mean on YouTube there are official ways, like
Yeah, that's true.
If it has Patrick Moraz's name in the user thing, but yeah, listening to this album, it's like I feel like when people think about prog rock keyboardists, they'll usually think of Rick Wakeman and Keith Emerson and maybe Tony Banks, but I feel like Patrick Moraz definitely deserves to be up there as well.
Yeah.
Especially in light of all like this stuff. Like it makes me want to check out more of like his stuff that I may have heard or may not have heard and see like what direction he went.
Yeah, Yes is his short time with Yes is an enormous peephole to Patrick Moraz. If he was not in Yes, I don't know how many people would even be aware of him. And that's not a criticism, and I'm just saying his music was so much under the commercial radar. We all know how a commercial relayer is. But my point is that he was just on a different track, if you will. And being in Yes gave him like incredible notoriety. Had he not been in Yes, I don't know how aware all of us familiar with him would be familiar with him and his work.
Yeah.
And maybe he's more popular outside of Yes with other works in Europe or Asia. I have no idea. The country, the region, Asia. I don't mean the band.
Yeah, I know what you meant.
Okay.
What do you think of the mixing of the story of I?
It's the production is great. I think that you know me. I love a big live sound. I love a big sound. It sounds bigger than some of the other albums that we've covered so far from that era, the solo albums. It's a nice big open sound. In fact, I think I have a picture ready to show up here. Here's Pat in the studio with a bunch of old gear. There's a couple Hammond organs. I think a Oberheim, some other unidentifiable stuff he probably threw together and Frankenstein. I love old gear. It's so cool to see this stuff. You got the drawbars on the organ right in this area here. Stuff like that is cool. These probably oscillators, these giant speakers. Even the parquet wood floor is archaic by today's standards. And so it's not just the instruments he used that made the sound, but the production work of the sound. And who was it produced by again? It was produced by Patrick, recorded and engineered by Chris Snoopy, Penny Kate, and Professor Jean Ristori. I'm not familiar with either of them, but they did a brilliant freaking job. It sounds great. To me, it sounds like more modern production than the era it is. What are your thoughts?
I think the only critique I have for the production is that Vivian's vocals on
A little buried.
it's buried on at least one of the tracks, maybe two, but at least one of them. So I would say I do wish that the vocals weren't as buried. But as far as the instrumental stuff, that gets a lot of work was very well taken care of with all of that. Just the way it just, it's like right in your face, in your ears. And yeah, so that's like my only quibble is that thing with Vivian's vocals, because I want to be able to hear the words more clearly.
Yeah, that's true. And your compliment to the rest of the production really weighs in if you consider the very wide spectrum of sounds that were used. It's not like he had just an electric piano, one synthesizer, and an organ. There's all kinds of sounds you've never heard anywhere else, basically,
Yeah. And we have like a couple more questions, and then we'll read some comments
and I have a question, actually, before we go into the list of questions. Because
Okay, yeah,
I don't
go
know
ahead.
the answer to this. Do you know whether or not he toured any of this?
I'm not sure if he. So, like I mentioned, he performed a tiny bit of it with Yes. I'm sure he's played bits of it in his solo shows, probably.
Since probably, like after Yes?
Yeah, like I remember hearing somewhere that he was performing like a solo show, and someone said, "Play this." I don't remember what the song is, but it was from this album, and he went ahead and played it. So.
That's pretty cool. There's a lot of musicians who, even though it's their material, if it was 10, 20 years ago, they might not be able to just pull it out and just do it.
Right, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Let alone remember words and stuff like that. We take that for granted, I think.
Right.
We listen to a lot of artists' music much, much more than they do. They hear it a lot while they're working on it. They record it, they tour it, and that's it. It might come back on a tour a year or two later, but they don't put their album. From all the ones I know, and that's a lot, they don't listen to their own stuff and put on albums and, in their earbuds, Carl Palmer, I'm going to put on Tarkus while I do some gardening or ride my bike. He's not doing that. So we know it so well inside and out as fans, hence the sing-alongs to certain things at concert that 10, 20 years later, like, thick as a brick. I don't remember that. We did that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know that he played Kashasa 5 years ago. It was around the time Yes were inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Oh.
So it might have been like in that same area. It was around the time he got Billy and Jeff to play The Smile Has Left Your Eyes for a bit. And
Interesting.
uh, Joe Cass, the drummer from Total Mass Retain, played drums while Patrick played Kashaza, and
Oh
it's
yeah.
just yeah. It's a really cool a video that people can find
I've
on
one
YouTube.
I've one more lame question before we go into our list. And this
Okay.
this is just to stir the pot. I would love to hear what fans have to say. Do you think, and just think before you answer, everybody. I don't think we have any comments yet, which is weird. We usually get a bunch of comments. Do you think, given the impact Relayer has on the legacy of Yes, and to me it's huge, it's way up there, given how many people it's their favorite album, should Patrick have been part of the induction of the Hall of Fame? I know there's no radio single. I know he was only on one album, but if you measure the impact of that album and that he had on that album, should he have been there? Is he that much cemented in the bigger picture of the Yes legacy? In my opinion, yes.
Yeah, well, my opinion was that every Yes member should have been part of that
Well,
induction.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, yeah, I know there's like the weird thing with okay, but
Yeah.
the
There
way
is some
you
weirdness in that, but
yeah, but the way you mentioned it, like absolutely, Relayer had a huge impact, especially in prog rock. So
and it still
yeah,
does. It holds up, and that's a huge element that goes with that. Someone, any prog fan who's never heard it, even if they hate it, they'd put it on and go, "What the fuck is this?" It is just so monumental. It really is. The story, no pun intended, the story of it all, the musicianship, the production, the album cover. Remember on Roger Dean's episode, we did a poll, and it was, I think, the first or second most favorite album cover by Roger and has the least amount of color. And it so
yeah.
goes with that album's music, the that's why I say there's so much to it, and he was a huge part of that. That's where I bring the question from.
Yeah, and you know he's a good sport about these things. You know, back then when the induction was going on and he was doing his solo show, I vaguely remember, and this might be on YouTube or Facebook or something, but he was saying, "Yes, yes has been recognized, much deserved. Oh, finally!" And someone in the audience was like, "You're part of that, Patrick," and Patrick was like, "We don't talk politics here, only music."
Yeah, yeah,
So
he's got a good sense of humor.
yeah, he's got a great sense of humor and he's very exuberant. And, you know, I've seen clips where he plays his solo shows and he'll like be like, you know, slapping the top of his piano as a fun, like, I guess, improvisation thing. And it just seems like he has fun whenever he does these solo things.
Yeah,
So,
and he, for all we know, he could be thinking there's no hard feelings because in his mind, Yes is the most bubblegum poppy thing he's ever done, which is really bizarre. But who knows?
yeah, I know he was with the Moody Blues for a while, but there
Yeah,
was like some like arguments there over like you know there was like that whole whether or not he was a full member or hired member, and they got that settled in court or whatever. But
right. But he was with them
yeah,
for a while. I'm
yeah,
surprised that's even a question.
yeah, like 78 to 91. Yeah,
Yeah, that's like what? He's a side guy for that long? That's kind of weird. If he was only on one or two songs, I would get it. But if he recorded the album, if he toured with them, if he wrote some of the music, he's a side guy. What the hell is that all about?
yeah, it's weird because he was with the Moody Blues much longer than he was with Yes,
Anybody, really?
but I still feel like the people who know Patrick, or maybe I'm biased because I'm more engulfed in like Yes fan circles, but I was gonna say like the people who know of Patrick know him best for Relayer.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
So
how might working with Yes have influenced Patrick's approach to Story of I, do you think?
you know, listening to the album, I'm rewinding in my head. I don't know if it affected it that much other than the vocal harmonies that you pointed out, and possibly the production side and process of recording and everything. He might have been influenced there, but to me, I don't know if it influenced him at all musically.
Okay,
What do you
because
think?
well, to me, it's funny because listening to, well, at least the first side of this album, going through it this time around, I was thinking to myself, if there were like more vocal harmonies and it wasn't just all or mostly instrumental, this sounds like it could have been the next natural progression for Yes, for
That's
Relayer.
interesting.
Like this could have been the next Yes album if they added more of
Lyrics
those.
and yeah,
Yeah, because it very much sounds Relayer-ish in places. It especially sounds
that's true.
it's very Sound Chaser, like blown up and expanded. Like there are lots of places that remind me of Sound Chaser on this.
But
Um,
how much of that is other Yes members versus a lot of Patrick and him just bringing that over to his album? See, that's why I'm not sure how much of an influence it was, or if it's vice versa.
right. Yeah, that's a good point. Do you think it was a conscious decision on his part to not have any Yes members on this?
Yeah, I don't think it was accidental. No, but
Yeah.
I know what
Okay.
you mean, like more of an intention. I think so. I think it accomplished what that intention was, if I'm correct, and that was he really wanted to stand out and just be his own thing, a true solo album, and not for other, as time has proven, for other versions of Yes with one or two or three members from the last thing they did.
Yeah, because I think not using Yes members like some of these others solo albums that we've talked about makes this feel more like a solo album.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. Just like Rick Wakeman.
yeah, well, Six Wives had
Oh, that's true.
like yeah, like everyone except
I
for
always
John
forget that.
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, as Rick went on, his further solo albums wouldn't have any Yes
Right.
members.
But
Uh,
like Chris has two, Alan's has two, Steve's has three. It's like they're just different versions of Yes, playing one of the guys' music, if you think about it. If you look at what's happened in the decades since, those are Yes bands.
right. So, with all that being said, how Yes is the story of I, in your opinion?
So after thinking about what you added to that question, I'd 20 to 25%.
Okay.
Because I really think it's the other way around with him in this case. I think what we hear on Relayer that we heard before this is Patrick.
Mm,
And we're hearing more of Patrick, not Patrick influenced by Yes. I think Patrick influenced Yes with his sound as much as Rick influenced them on Fragile or
okay.
Fragile, either one.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I get what you mean. Like in my head, I was thinking maybe 40 to
Oh
50%
wow.
because I was imagining the like, what if this had been a Yes album
Right.
instead type of thing. But yeah, it's definitely. I feel like if the question were how sound chaser is it, it'd be like at least 70, 75, maybe.
Right, but a
But
lot of Sound Chaser is uh, Alan and Chris, and it
right,
was Alan's idea to come up with the speed changes. Remember, he's in that article about the making of the album, which is the best article I've ever written on the making of an album, where Alan's quoted saying he wanted to be like driving and changing gears and downshifting and then speeding up and then slowing down, speeding up and then slowing way down. There's a lot of influence in there that is the rhythm section as Chris and Alan. So I don't want to take any credit away from Patrick, but I don't want to give him credit for the contributions of the other guys. The sound of the album, the sound, I think is 70% Patrick.
Yeah, the sound has a lot of fusion stuff and world
And the
music.
different
So
keyboard sounds that he brought to the table that we didn't hear before and we didn't hear since. Not never since then did someone say, "Hey, do that one keyboard sound thing that he does in those 18 bars of this." We don't hear that. He came and then he went.
yeah, I guess for me, it's easier for me to imagine this being retrofitted into a Yes album than even Elias of Sun Hillo as a Yes album, because maybe part of it is that Elias has maybe too much of John's vocals, so it's hard to imagine like less of that. Um, but yeah, interesting stuff and like fair
Yeah.
points all around.
Okay, cool.
So we got a bunch of comments, and I just picked out 10 for us to read.
Okay.
Asking what people think of the story of I. So
Let's take turns reading them. You start with Brian's.
Okay, so Brian Dillon said, "Fantastic album, was never off my turntable when it first came out. Vocalist superb, and of course the playing of Patrick and the rest of the musicians." And quotes, he mentions the song "The Best Years of Our Lives" and puts the 100 symbol,
Icon.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. Toby Braddock says, "I love the album and wish he had had at least one more opportunity to contribute to Yes." Whoops, let me stretch this out. Sorry. Yes Music has Relay is one of my favorite albums. I agree 100%.
And Stuart Harris says, "Bought this on release in 1976, I believe he means. Only many years later, I heard Os Mutantes, the Brazilian progressive rock band who had a similar sound. Ever since, I've wondered if they were an influence." That's interesting, because hearing that comparison makes me want to listen to that band.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed this album.
Yeah, and especially knowing that there's Brazilian influence in Patrick's music and on the album. Thanks for that, Stuart. Those are great points. Eric Medlow says, "I love this album as it was such a forward-looking combo of synth, world music, percussion, has great songwriting, way underrated." I agree. Yeah, I was going to bring that up. I love the percussion aspect and recognize the Brazilian shades right away. And it's cool. A Swiss guy with some Brazilian music influences. I love it.
Yeah, and Gary Wright said, "I remember..."
The Gary Wright?
Wait, what?
There's a big musician named Gary Wright.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know of Richard Wright, but anyway.
The different, right.
Yeah, he says, "I remember Slinky being listed as one of the instruments."
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, I think in the music video, I remember he might have like been hitting a Slinky coil thing.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And wasn't there something about that in that article that he or Alan said in the war scene, the battle scene of Gates of Delirium, there was some thing that they just knocked over? Was it the thing that held all the gongs or something like that for the big crashing sound? Do you remember that?
I don't recall what it was off the top of my head.
And there are some sounds that sound like they could be giant springs or something in there as well. That's interesting. Gregory Coase says it's incredibly percussion based. You'd think Bill Bruford was involved.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And
yeah,
the percussion really stands out.
Yeah.
I just looked at the article that you mentioned. It says there were springs and pieces of metal, brakes, and clutch plates. That's what the crashing was.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, I'm not sure how this is pronounced. Huston Bop or maybe Houston Bop Salters.
That is such if that's your real name, it's like a movie star name. I love that. Yeah. Houston Bop Salters.
Or it could be a band.
Huh?
It could be a band name even.
Totally. I love that.
But anyway, this person says, "I loved this album when it was released and I still love it today. For me, it was the first I ever had heard of world music, though I was familiar with prog because of Yes and Fusion," and sunglasses emoji.
Interesting. When I hear that and read it with you, I'm thinking, when was world music termed? You know, and I don't know the answer to that. I know who would know, and that would be Peter Lockett, our friend, world percussionist who played with Amy Winehouse, Peter Gabriel, Robert Plant, on and on and on. Um, I'm gonna have Pete on. Actually, he was when I invited him. He
On
was in
Drum
the,
Talk TV.
yeah, on Jump Talk TV. He was in the process of moving from one continent to another. So I'll reach back
Okay.
out to him. We'll ask that question. Richard,
Yeah, I just looked it up. So the term
oh,
world music has been credited to ethnomusicologist Robert E. Brown, who coined it in the early 1960s. And
wow, I didn't realize that long ago.
yeah, but it got popularized even more in the 1980s as a marketing category.
And that was probably in a huge part due to, respectively, Paul Simon and Peter Gabriel. They worked in a
Maybe.
lot of world music elements with some music that became very commercial.
Yeah. But yeah, go ahead and read Richard's comment.
Richard Jabrinsky says, you probably thought I'd screw that up, right? I love that album and still listen to it now. It takes me back to the long, warm summers of the 70s when I was young and everything you listened to was new. Isn't that the freaking truth? When everything you listened to was new. I love that.
Yeah, I love that effect that music has when it can take you back to a time when you first listened to it.
Yeah. But that
yeah,
period, he's right, that period of music when everything was new, no matter what the genre was, Sly and the Family Stone, Chicago, ELP, King Crimson, all of that, whatever they were doing, it had not been done before. It was new.
Right. Whereas, and we've talked about this before, like music today can still be really impressive. Like they can still be like those epics and whatnot, but it's as amazing as it can be. It still doesn't feel like the first time.
It's not
been done.
groundbreaking.
Right.
Yeah. Doesn't take away from it. We're just saying it's not. The firsts may have been played out.
Right.
We don't know. We don't know. Go ahead with Fred.
Yeah. So Fred Beaulieu. Beaulieu. Okay. Thank you. Says wonderful album, so dynamic with lots of unexpected twists and turns. Best years of our lives still resonates with me strongly. I played the album to death when I first got it and still listen to it today.
This is going into heavy rotation for me. Dave Marquez says, I bought all the Yes solo albums when they came out. I bought The Story of Vi and was happy with how good it is. I bought all the Patrick Moraz's albums after when they came out. So this was his gateway drug to Patrick's music. I love that, Dave. So you picked 10 comments.
Yeah,
You said we
Gates
got a
of
lot.
delirium, so to speak.
Yeah. Ooh, that's heavy. You said you picked out 10 comments. Were there any, and it doesn't sound like you would do this, but were there any that you didn't select that were kind of like, it was meh, or too esoteric, or it just wasn't for me? They were all positive comments, weren't they?
Most of them were. There was one that didn't like the vocals very much, and there was another that didn't like the album very much.
Oh.
But there were also a few who said...
Did you ban them from the page? No, I'm just kidding.
There were a few who said this was the best blah, and it was like different categories. Like I think someone said best world music album they'd heard. Someone said
wow,
best solo album of this period that they'd heard. So
wow,
yeah, so
neat stuff.
Yeah, so there might be some people who this is not for them, but there are definitely like other people who really love and enjoy this.
Yeah. And folks, Steve and I both know that not everything's for everybody. We're not the type of people like, oh, just because we don't like it, it sucks. And there's not a lot that we don't like, especially in the area of prog rock. I don't know if there's anything I don't like. There are things I favor, but I don't know if there's anything I'd say, oh my gosh, I never want to hear that again. But I don't think. Is there? What was that?
I mean, if it wasn't that great, you probably forgot it.
Yeah, like that Pink Floyd album with the prism. What was that?
Oh, is that Dark Side of the Moon?
Yeah, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, screw that up. No, I'm just kidding. That's my favorite Pink Floyd album of all time. Yeah. Oh, before we sign off, we should mention that, and people who are watching the video know this, but my Father's Day gift to Dad came in the mail. It's the Yes shirt. It's actually it was meant for the 2020 cruise to the edge that never happened, and so they have it on the Yes World store, and it was discounted, so it was like, yeah, it's got a butterfly on the back with the
Yeah,
tour
it's got,
guide.
and the destinations. I don't know how well you can see it or if you can see it.
Yeah, if you stand up, you can see the yeah. Yeah,
It's
and I
cool.
love the shade of green and black that they have on there.
Yeah, me too. And it was so I opened up the mailbox today. Oh, the cat has the envelope. It came in one of those plastic, And I looked at the return. I could tell it was a shirt. So I looked at the return address, and the name for the return address was Yes, with an address in Nashville. But the return address was Yes. I'm like, what? What'd they send me? And then I
Yeah,
opened it and I saw the receipt says that it was billed to Steven Schinder. Then I knew what was going on. So thank you very much. We're going to show another photo of Patrick as we go out with some more solo music from Patrick. But before we show that, Steve, where can they find us if they're only familiar with one platform, and how can they send stuff in to us?
yeah. So if people want to watch the video as we go live, they can go to facebook.com/Yesshift, and we try to post when we're going live and stuff. So I think there's like a see first option you could click at the top, and maybe that'll help you. But if you miss it, you can just watch it in the archive on there, and it's also on the YouTube channel. And if you're just an audio only person, you can go to anchor.fm/Yesshift and see all the podcast platforms that we're on. Chances are, if you have a podcast app, we're probably already on there. You just search Yesshift on there and we'll pop up. And you can also email us at yesshiftpodcast@gmail.com. And you can send us in comments or episode ideas, and we might read your thoughts on the show within reason, of course. And yeah, I'm glad we got to talk about the story of I. And I just realized that the black and green on that Yes logo on your shirt kind of matches the story of I cover.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's show that again. Hey, you're right. So, there we go.
But yeah, I'm glad.
Wow, it's the same colors. Look at that.
Yeah,
That's
but
bizarre.
I'm really glad we were able to rediscover this album. It's like, how did I spend so much time not listening to
Yeah,
it?
me too. I'm embarrassed by it.
Yeah, I'm
I've
mad
got
at myself.
decades of life on Earth on you, and I haven't listened to it other than 2 or 4 times back when it came out when I was 13.
Yeah, but in terms of upcoming stuff, I know that June 27th, I believe, is the anniversary of when Chris Squire passed away in 2015. So I'm sure there will be tributes posted and whatnot. Check out Miguel Bass. He's got some stuff going on.
And we'll repost our episode of Fish Out of Water.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Yeah.
And on the 28th, so the day after, we'll hopefully, I guess I have to like say that in case anything else happens. Hopefully,
Sometimes life happens and our schedule changes.
Yeah, like at 7 p.m. Pacific that day. If all goes well, on the 28th, we'll finally review the Oliver Wakeman box set collaborations. And
Love
yeah,
this.
so we got some stuff coming up. We'll talk about our July stuff in the near future, but yeah, lots of great stuff coming up.
Absolutely. Thanks for following what we do, everybody. Here's some Pat Moraz for you as we go out. Thanks, everybody, and thank you, Patrick Moraz, for decades of amazing